Linz Stanley poster that I made. Um, it's just gonna be a quick kind of overview of some of the techniques I used, and I know a lot of my friends are gonna be like, "Why are you showing people how to do this stuff?" But I do want to say one quick thing. Uh, Knowing how it's made isn't gonna save you the time. It was still a mountain of work. So I just want to kind of run quickly through how I did it, and this will show you the techniques. But if you don't know how to do the drawing, it's not going to help you. Um, of course, full credit goes to Lindsay Stanley, the model of the actual cosplay, which is Hera Syndulla from Star Wars Rebels, and also Carlos G Photography for the original photograph, which I used as reference. And of course, both their links are there. First of all, let me start off with the original drawing, which would prove to be too big to go on my scanner. It's huge. I drew it on the same stock paper that I used to do my Megan Fox sketch a couple years ago. It's a great cream stock, and of course this was done in the warm and cool gray Copics. But when I went to Kinko's to get it scanned, which they charge by the square foot apparently, um, they used some kind of weird color correction where they made the white of the paper white, which wouldn't be a problem except the paper was actually yellow. So I did lose some value when they auto corrected from the yellow stock to a white. So what I did was I went ahead and took a scan at home that I already did that I knew was not going to have the sufficient. I tried to scan it in sections and then splice the sections, but it didn't work. There was always a curl there, and it didn't look right. So what I did is I used that as a reference, and then taking the original scan, I threw on a layers level and made it a little bit darker. But then the brown started looking very copper, so I made an adjustment layer to make it a little bit more closer to what the warm gray Copics look like. But then the cool grays looked too ashy, so then I made a separate correction layer for just the blues. And it still looks a little bit on the bluish side, but that's because I did all that under a yellow layer. So this is about how the original drawing looks. The color of the paper, the tone of the markers, a little bit of variation where I had to mask out the blues versus the cool gray versus the warm gray. So it's not 100% exactly like the drawing, but it's close enough. And I made a curves layer just to punch the darks up a little bit more, but I think that wound up being too much. So what I did next was I basically defined the shapes, colored them in, and what this is a multiply layer, where it's adjusted to 60%. Just to show you what's going on here, let me turn off, yeah, there we go. Basically what I do is I just turned off the actual marker drawing, so you can see the colors are very flat, and they're just the shapes as defined by, I just basically painted over the appropriate section with the colors. But it does tend to look really flat, so what I did was I made another layer exactly the same, except on this one I added some value. It's really tough to tell, but you can kind of see some spots where, especially on the lips, where there's like light touches and dark touches, and most of the areas I left pretty much the same, although I did add some lights and darks in the greens, which are really hard to see. But when you add the marker back in, you can kind of tell these parts are a lot more yellow and these parts are a little bit more blue-green. And especially with the lips, it does give a little bit more definition than the flat colors did. But what I did next was, obviously it's still on the yellow paper, and even if I take the yellow paper away, it's still got the white paper from the original scan, and I want it to be transparent. So what I did was I basically threw another layer on top and multiplied it. And let me see if I can do that real quick without Photoshop giving me issues. You can imagine these colors, these bold colors, are really helpful for defining shapes, because you can use these really obnoxious colors and exactly see where you masked. So what I did was basically did a gradient fill. And there we go. And then I multiplied it. And then what I did was I took the wand tool and selected just the areas that are black. And then it gave me a complete black bold outline. and then erased away all the pink, and then filled in all the spots that were inside the black outline. And basically it gave me this shape right here, which basically masks out the entire drawing. And the blank paper is obviously, white. And then I use that to make a layer mask. So now what I have is the drawing colored with a transparent background. So all this is basically nothing. Then what I did was I think I saved it as a PNG file, so I could transport it into Photoshop and then have all these clean edges, and the paper's gone, basically. It's just the drawing, just her. So then I set that part aside, and then in Illustrator, I basically brought in some scanned drawings, and Illustrator's taking a second to start up. Sorry about that, folks. There we go. And then what I did is I made scans of like letter forms that I'd drawn out in my hand, and then in Illustrator I just traced around each letter form. And you can see it's not exactly like it was because I made some adjustments after I got it into Illustrator, but everything was drawn by hand and then retraced here in Illustrator. And then you have this piece here, which goes. Let me kind of see if I can move it. Yeah, it's giving me a hard time here. But basically what I did was I dropped in scans of the original art, and then traced over them. And then when I was done, I would save this part as a flat, like a TIFF or a PNG file, and then that would be imported into Photoshop. Now here's where the neat stuff starts to happen. Now I'll show you the basics of what I did. So like, for example, let me just pick like this R letter. Oh, I've got the the contiguous turned off, but that's okay. That'll give you the idea of what I did. What I did now was, I'm going to deselect this or it's not going to look right. There we go. So now I've just got the characters, the letters, and everything selected. Now what I did for the first option was, let me pick a dark color that looks good. Let me just pick the dark blue just for the sake of it. And then a light blue just so you can get a contrast. Now what I first did is I create, in this layer, I fill it with, say, a light color. So now everything on this layer is going to be filled with the light color, which would be all the letter forms. Now I go up to the selection, modify, expand. Now expand to 20. Just grow the selection by 20. Takes a little bit of a while because I'm filming as well as doing Photoshop, as well as having Illustrator open, so it is kind of slowing things down a bit. Now what I do with this is I take the other color and I fill the darker color behind it. So when all is said and done, you see, you got your nice outlining. Now, for the scroll work, I kind of did the same concept, except I expanded into it rather than into the scroll. So basically, the outline goes into the green part rather than into the cream. That's because I ran out of room. But that's okay. I mean, that was kind of to be expected. So that's the basic idea. But then when I was done, it wound up looking very, very flat. So what I did, I mean, even if you plop that, Linz on there, it looks very, very flat. And then I started looking, and then I said, okay, maybe I can add some texture on there, and there's actually a very, very slight texture. Let me zoom in if I can get in there close enough. All right. Here we go. And you might be able to detect, oops, too far. You can detect the slight, looks like a grainy texture, almost like a sandpaper cut. Well, like a sandstone texture. That's with it off, that's with it on. And it gives it some more texture, but it wasn't enough. So I said, okay, let me go ahead and throw in some, you know, like interference clouds meant to look like, basically like paper. And it looked too blotchy, and it still didn't look right. So when I went back to Mucha posters, Alphonse Mucha, who's a huge inspiration for my poster, I realized that there was some shading to it. It wasn't just, you know, a flat color. There was always some variance in shading. So what I did then was I would take my wand tool, select the shapes. Let me unselect the contiguous. Whoops. Alright, deselect the contiguous. And then what I do is I take a darker color, like just say black for example, go to my brush tool, and then just hit some areas, make them extra black. Or whatever color I want to use. See, that gives a little bit of depth, but then what I would also do is I'd come back here, select this color, and then maybe bump up a lighter color, desaturate it a little bit. And then I'd come back in here, just lighten up a little bit. Oops, wrong thing. I just realized I'm on the wrong layer. Go into the top layer, oops, also wrong. I have to deselect before I do this. There we go. And there's another way of doing that. That's locking your transparency layers. Once you got the shapes defined, if you lock the transparencies, you're never going to accidentally paint outside the borders. But now, see if I hit this with some light. Give it a second to process because Photoshop's slow when you're doing 3 things at once. Just hit a little bit there. And a little bit there. See, now it gives a lot more depth, rather than just those flat colors. Because you can see, compare this bottom part to this part up here, a lot more livelier. So then when I realized I had that done, once I realized that the gradients were going to look great, I went ahead and turned off that paper texture thing because it was too distracting. Just basically made a background layer just of, you know, just the paper part of it. And there's the circle part. That's the background. You can see where the parts are darker. And then the foreground parts, which you can also kind of tell, are kind of lighter in the middle parts. And dropped the original drawing in there and put the border on it. So there I had it. So basically it's lots of little pieces coming together. The shading at the last minute really pulled it off because then it gave it a lot more depth, especially in the scroll work up top. The shading really helped it out quite a bit. If Photoshop will let me go up there. It's a pretty big file too. I mean, we're talking 200, you know, I mean, this is at 50%. So, I mean, this is at 100%. So, I mean, this file is huge. There we go, get a smaller brush so it's not going to be such a strain on the redrawing. There we go. Oops, too far. It's Photoshop and Illustrator running at the same time, and it doesn't know how to deal. But anyway, you can kind of see right now. There we go. You can kind of see now how the lights and the darks come up. So it looks really nice now that the shading's in there. And then of course I cropped off the bottom part. There was supposed to be, you know, Hera Syndulla written down there, but it just didn't look right, and I was getting the feeling that everything I added to it was just taking away. So for right now, I left that part off. I might just go ahead and throw like a line down here or something and then put the name Hera Syndulla down there. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. If I do anything more with it, so I left that part open and just cropped it up for the part I did release so far. But I'm not satisfied with anything. I'm done with it, and I feel like it will be taking away from it. So, I mean, that kind of gives you kind of a quick overview of how I did it, quick and dirty, and just covering the basics. And if you have any questions, I mean, you can leave comments. Like I said, definitely recommend you check out Linz Stanley, her work, and also Carlos G Photography, because, like I said, she took some amazing photos of the cosplay. I probably would have drawn like 4 or 5 of them, but I really don't have the time, because they're all. It was a very good shoot, very amazing shoot, very good set of photos. And again, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your art.